Good afternoon.
Well, good, and a good evening to you, Michael. How are you?
Oh boy, just zooming around.
Well, listen, it is great to have you on the show tonight. I'm looking so forward to talking to you. I have been digging deep into the Billy Meier information, these prophecies, and I find it fascinating, absolutely fascinating. So and a shout out to the listener who recommended that I have you on the show. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, who's that?
I don't have it right here in front of me. I don't know if they wanted me to mention them on air, but yeah, somebody had said that they heard you on Dark Matter and that I should give you a buzz and see if you'd come on. So I got you, and we're here, and I thought maybe we'd start out with maybe a little bit about your background and leading up to your interest in the Billy Meier contacts.
Oh, sure. Pardon me a little.
And we are live.
Oh, okay. Well, my background was in fine arts, music, inventing, very creative stuff. And I walked into a bookstore in 1979 in L.A. I saw the first photo book of Meier's, UFO photos. And that was what really, kind of just riveted me in that moment. Now, when I saw those photos, to me, it's just kind of like I knew they were real. However, I always say to people that it's been more than looking at UFO photos for 36 years that have convinced me that what we're dealing with is, singularly unique, authentic case of a man on Earth actually being in contact with other human beings from elsewhere in the universe.
It's fascinating, and I could understand where a lot of people would have doubt of these things, because in my position, I have a lot of people who contact me on a regular basis and tell me that they're in contact with ET, and most of them I don't believe. But then when you get things like with Billy Meier, there's some prophecy there that is really hard to deny. I mean, how would he know this stuff?
Well, yes. I mean, the problem I have is someone who has been interested in this kind of phenomenon since I was, a very, very young child. No one has been able, none of the people who claim to be contactees can put one single piece of verifiable proof, unique, significant information, something of extraterrestrial manufacture on the table. It's all anecdotal. Hardly any of them even have a fuzzy photo to show you, and it's all sorts of claims. Meier, is just drowning us with evidence and information, and unfortunately, it's a very poor indication of the level of thinking of humanity that we haven't long ago grasped that this is real.
I would agree with that. See, I'll listen to anybody, especially if they got evidence they want to produce. I mean, I'm all ears. I mean, I'm never going to wave my hand at anybody and say, baloney, until I know for sure it is. And so tell me a little bit more about Billy Meier first, and then about his contacts and his privacy or his prophecies. I just find it all so fascinating, and I was reading through these prophecies today, and just there's not enough time in the day. There's so much.
You're right. It's like it's voluminous. It truly is. Meier is the source of the most abundant, specific, and impeccably accurate prophetic information in human history. And again, most people don't know that either. He makes Nostradamus look like somebody who's just mumbling and making, wild statements. Meier names very, very, very specific events, places, situations. Sometimes they will give dates, but often they won't, because they don't want us to sit around waiting, either hypnotized looking for something to hit us, or inactive because we feel it's fatalistically, been deemed that we must experience this on a particular date. So much of this information really still gives us the free will. If we haven't passed that point of no return, it gives us the free will to start taking this advice, making adjustments, and getting ourselves out of what is otherwise truly, truly, truly a dead-end situation for humanity. It's going to set us back here on Earth eons. We will have hundreds of years of very, very, very painful struggle. And I don't think people can grasp it, honestly. It's like they don't want to pay attention. And despite the fact that Meier's information just keeps on being authenticated. So we've got to take a look at it. We've got to be critical thinkers, not accept claims by anybody, but look at the evidence for ourselves. And, we have been putting it out there for years and years and years, sending this information to scientists, to so-called leaders, to people that claim to be interested in the UFO community and all this stuff. And we have some stunning, highly credible people that are endorsing the authenticity, that have contributed to authenticating the information and evidence in the case. These are people who are really world-class scientists and all of that. The problem is, unfortunately, that it is still suppressed. It is kept below the radar, that people in the masses don't yet know about this.
And Michael, I was saying in the beginning of the show how people have, pretty much carved their lives in some manner over prophecies of over 2,000 years ago. I said, but then when somebody comes in our time era with something like this, it's like nobody wants to believe it. And I say you're making a big mistake if you don't at least take a look at it and with a serious eye.
I agree with you. I mean, it's like, oh gosh, how can I put this? The Meier case is the reason for the UFO cover-up. It is the reason for the UFO cover-up. Now, it wasn't always true. That's, the UFO cover-up actually started way back around World War I, and then it really got in full swing shortly after Roswell and all that, and around the time of the Roosevelt administration. But since that time, since there's nothing left of Roswell, since there's no evidence that can be forced to be presented or revealed by the government, every single one of these stupid petition Washington disclosure things are a farce. They're a circus. We chase our tails, and each and every one of them absolutely, deliberately prevents the Meier case from ever being prevented, because it would shut that farce down that is called disclosure. The Meier case is what the UFO cover-up really is about.
Right, and I've talked to some people who've been on the show, and they wanted to put those petitions forth, and been doing it for years. And I always say the same thing each time: I don't think you're going to get anywhere with it, but good luck, because they're not going to come out and admit that they've been lying all this time. And if they did come out and admit to it, then they would have to tell us a lot more things that they don't want us to know. And so I don't see it happening, but I want to get into some of these prophecies in a moment, and one that just fascinates me. But I thought maybe a little bit about Billy Meier and how these contacts came about. A little bit more about him and how he got in contact like that.
Yes, well, actually, everything started when he was extremely young. He was a 5-year-old boy in Switzerland, and his father and he saw a silver disc fly overhead. They didn't know what it was. His father thought maybe it's some kind of a secret weapon of Hitler's towards the end of the Second World War, but they didn't know. And it was a short time later that young Edward, he hadn't yet gotten the nickname of Billy, but young Edward kind of heard a voice, a man's voice speaking to him in his head. It was quite a surprise for this young guy who was speaking to him in his native tongue, German, and perhaps at that point in the Swiss German dialect. And he had subsequently gone out again, as he often did, to play in the fields and in the woods, and he went deeper into the woods on this occasion. And there, standing in a clearing next to a pear-shaped craft on 3 strut-like legs, is an elderly man elderly looking, standing in what looks to young Meier very similar to a deep sea diver outfit without the helmet. And he said, this man was very kindly. I had no fear of him. He just had a very safe and good feeling about him. I came closer. We spoke to each other. He invited me on board his craft, and that began for Meier 11 years of teaching, tutoring, working with him, taking him places on and off this world, introducing to him the people on Earth who would either at that point already were or would become players on the world stage. He would learn many, many things about the distant past. He would be shown things about future events. He would have his own thinking abilities enhanced with technology to bring forward into his conscious awareness and control abilities that were latent in him because of his own spirit's, very ancient origins. And so this would be the beginning. It would span, as I said, 11 years before he would have his, teaching and mentoring taken over by a woman named Asket from an adjoining universe, not just the solar system or galaxy, but literally from an adjoining universe. Her people, the Timar people in the Dal universe, are said to be kind of close working associates, if you will, of the Pleiadian extraterrestrials that Billy's been meeting with now for more than 73 years.
It's incredible, and it's almost, I guess for an average person it would be really hard to believe, but for me I know we're not alone. Nobody has to tell me we're not alone. But now this goes a step further. I've seen UFO craft, but I've never been on one, and I've never talked to an ET, and Billy Meier did, and so I want to know everything I can about it. Now, I do want to bring this up. There was one prophecy that I heard mentioned that it turned a light bulb on in my head, and I said, holy cow, how did he know this? But it had to do with a major earthquake, and he said at the time, the cars, they looked different, they looked funny, and they didn't have rear view mirrors. And that's how you would know the time of this event. That fascinates me because, as you know, they're coming out now with cars without the rear view mirrors. They've got these cameras.
I know. Well, let me tell you what that's about. It's a very controversial thing, but all that one needs to do is start thinking through it. And oh boy. So here's what it is. In 1978, Meier was meeting with the investigative team that came from America. And that investigative team was the retired Lieutenant Colonel Wendell Stevens from the U.S. Air Force, Britt and Lee Elders. They were very active as high-level private investigators for Fortune 500 companies, working with electronic countermeasure, technologies, securing computers, phone lines, safe rooms, counter-espionage type stuff. Very, very high-level, serious people who work at that level. Banks, the whole thing. Now, when Wendell Stevens in 1978, early 78, first was sent some of Meier's information, and it may have actually been late 77, but sent his information and some photographs, he was very excited about it, and he planned on going over to Switzerland to start to investigate. However, Lee and Britt, who were friends of his, how can we put it? They were skeptical of this whole thing, and they felt that Wendell might be, subject to being flim-flammed a bit. So they said, "Look, Wendell, we're gonna go with you and help on this investigation." And Wendell said, "Fine." That began what turned out to be an over 8-year coming and going on-site investigation in Switzerland of Meier, his family, the surroundings, resources, any possible money, technology support, anything for what this phenomenal case comprised of which, of course, after all that time and to this day, they found none. Now, I should add that Meier's contacts continue. He's had hundreds these are 40 years of documented contacts. Okay. So in 1978, they're sitting around the kitchen table with Billy, And he happens to mention something about the San Francisco earthquake, and they said, "Oh, you mean the one from 1906?" And he said, "No, the one that's coming." And they looked at each other and they said, "What on earth are you talking about?" So he said, "Okay, moment." And he got up, went out of the room, came back with one of those little familiar yellow Kodak envelopes. And in there were at least 11 photographs, not paintings, not drawings, photographs of San Francisco taken from various angles, while the city was clearly in the midst of an enormous catastrophe. Fallen buildings, smoke, fire, clearly it's being devastated by an earthquake. And Billy will not tell them when this happens. He only tells them that he was taken forward in time by these Pleiadian because he knew this event would occur and he wanted to photograph it. So they're looking at these photographs. He won't tell them when. And he says, well, to them, you just have to look at it, make up your own mind. So they started to study the photos as carefully as they could to try to determine a time frame. What Wendell Stevens especially noticed was that the cars in the streets of San Francisco in these photographs didn't look anything like the cars of the day of 1978. Instead, as you mentioned, not only didn't most of them apparently have any side view, outside rear, mirrors, the cars were generally rounder in shape. There was a lot more windshield glass. In some cases, it swept up into the roofline. We see these kinds of cars on the streets now. And once the new cars with the, mirrorless exteriors where everything will be on camera, once those cars are in mass production from companies like Toyota, Tesla, Mercedes, and others, we will be in those times. And it's not all that far from us time-wise. I think we can recognize that because of these developments.
Yeah, so I was going to say, based on that right there, I would say it's probably, it looks like it would be somewhere within the next 5 to 10 years. I mean, because we're right there.
I think you're right. I think I was specking it out between 5 and 7, but I think within 10 years, I think you're quite right. Wow. This is the type of thing, it just sets you back on your heels, because this one man is at the center of this entire controversy. He's produced for examination 1,200 clear, mainly daytime photos of up to 4 of the craft, 8 films, a video, an assortment of metal alloy samples analyzed at IBM and deemed to be irreproducible with any technology available to the scientist, Marcel Vogel. He produced sound recordings that he brought in that were recorded in front of as many as 17 witnesses in an open field on an Iowa cassette recorder that were examined in 4 separate sound labs and were deemed to be irreproducible even with synthesizers. And just this last year, 3 new photo analyses were done of his evidence that hadn't been examined before. All of it was authenticated. All of the protocols and tools for examination were published, so anybody can go and duplicate the tests.
I see. So yeah, now there was people out there who kept claiming, well, it's this or it's that, it's a fake, but none of them could duplicate it.
That's right. And to this day, they can't. There's some people that can make nice models of UFOs and take photos that look similar, but if you tested them, they'd show them to be models of UFOs, and that'd be it.
Now, these prophecies, now let me ask this quick. Was he sure it was an earthquake, or could it have been some kind of big bomb or asteroid even, or something like that?
Well, no, because he had specifically asked to be taken there at the time when, as he said, he knew, from his own figuring, that the earthquake would hit. And he, in his conversation with the extraterrestrial, I think it was Quetzal, who took him there, they confirmed that that's what they were looking at.
I see. So now these prophecies that he was given, they will happen, or they could happen, or they could be changed? How does that work?
Well, prophecies are warnings of things that will happen if we don't make course corrections. They are not predictions. Predictions are things that will happen with certainty, and they usually, but not always, pertain to cosmic events, something coming, an asteroid from space or this or that. But they are not, the predictions are not alterable. But since we say that the prophecies can still be changed in time, if we don't change them, then they turn into predictions. So these are distinctions that are very important. There's some things that will happen. For instance, there's a prediction that there will be a 9.0 earthquake, followed by a tsunami, followed by another earthquake and tsunami in the northwest, in the area of the Cascadian subduction zone. Meier published this 3 years before the scientists from ASU came up with the same exact prediction. There's another prediction. There's a prediction that there will be an explosion of a volcano, a volcanic eruption in the Canary Islands. In terms of pinpointing it, I think it's called Cumbre Vieja volcano in Las Palmas or La Palma area or something like that. And it will erupt. If it is not graded down on the western facing side, the Atlantic facing side, if it isn't graded down in time, when that eruption takes place, it will send a mammoth tidal wave, tsunami, not only north and slightly northeast up the coasts, hitting parts of Europe, but clear across the Atlantic to the Atlantic seaboard of the U.S. If it is not graded down in time, that means that about 1 trillion tons of mass are dumped into the ocean, and then up to 20 million people could lose their lives because that tsunami would penetrate up to 12 miles inland, coming in at enormous speed with extremely, extremely high waves.
Well, I'm a little safe because I'm 2 hours away from the coast right now, but I still don't feel good about that.
I hear you.
Don't feel good about that at all. And and what about the Fukushima whole incident there? Now, when this prophecy of earthquake came, could that have been any part of it, or was that prophesized at all?
It wasn't prophesied. What was prophesied was that we were going, and this goes back many, many years, that because of our use of atomic energy, we would have enormous catastrophes. We actually have already environmental poisoning that has been going on since Hiroshima, Fukushima, Nagasaki, the atomic testing that took place before those times. It has contaminated already our environment. And Fukushima, Meier published information within about a week of Fukushima that specified exactly what had happened, the meltdowns, the real extreme danger now of the contamination going through the sea, the food chain, the air, everything. And that information is only recently being reluctantly corroborated because it was right. Now that they're releasing more and more information about just how drastic this whole situation is in Japan, well, people are going, oh my goodness, and then they look, and Meier had already published it a couple years ago. Same thing with the BP disaster. Scientists are now coming out with the same findings we've had online for a couple years. We even illustrated that BP disaster along with other things in an online comic book so people could read it and see it. This is the real deal.
And I'm being asked, how big will the tidal wave be from this earthquake?
From the one coming from
Yeah.
the Canary Islands, or from the one up north?
Well, I guess from either or.
Well, what we know in terms of Meier's information, which I say has been almost exactly corroborated in OSU, Oregon State University's own projections, the 9.0 earthquake will run for 5 minutes at 9.0. That's a horrendous experience. 9.0, 5 straight minutes. Then a tsunami sweeps in, hitting, I guess, the Portland area. It's up there in Oregon area. And then another earthquake and another tsunami. So however high those waves will be, the land and the people are set up for just enormous devastation, because the force of the earthquake presages an enormous tsunami. And the one coming from the east, from the Canary Islands, I'm not sure of the dimensions. I think they said that some of the waves could reach a couple hundred feet. And coming in, when they finally are shorebound, that energy comes in at virtually just about supersonic speed, because the shock wave travels at that kind of speed through the ocean, and then as it starts to move the water closer to the coastlines, with the change in, the way coastlines and all this stuff, the upslope from the and what have you, then the waves form into very high masses and come slamming in. So these are things that look, if we get that far, they have already foretold, Meier was foretelling in 1958, this horrendous, what he called irrepressible worldwide terrorism from Islamic fundamentalists. They've already long foretold the fall of France, that's coming, that Islamic terrorism is going to spread through Europe and other places worldwide.
And look what just happened there. They had that false flag, terrorist attack on the street there. I think that they're doing these things to pretty much condition and control the people, basically to take over, just like what he's saying, right?
Well, I wouldn't argue, because at this point, people are honestly just so. I wish I could come up with a perfect word. They're battered by the manipulations, by the realities, by their own, pardon me, I hate to say it, but by their own lack of attentiveness, by their own choosing to be overly entertained instead of paying attention to important things in the world. So suddenly people run around and start screaming, how can this happen to me? How can this happen to us? Why didn't anybody warn us? Meier has been warning people for decades, but this is shut down. Not only is it shut down by the government and the military intelligence community, it's shut down by the UFO people. That industry does not want people to know about this. They just want to make noise. They want to sell their silly lying contact and abduction stories while real things are going on in the world. This is Meier's. Look, in 1987, Meier was foretelling the fall of France to Islamic radicalism. 1987. He's also in that same document. He foretells the destruction of the World Trade Center, the Ebola epidemic that we just had, the Russian military movements that will eventually attack Scandinavia. They're going on right now. He even named the exact city the Russians would move their troops to, and they did 4 years ago.
Yeah, I was reading that one, and I thought that was fascinating, too. Now, I wondered this, Michael, how could the ETs know all this information unless they're somewhat behind it? I mean, I don't want to start pointing fingers or anything, but, how do they know that this stuff is going to go down? Are they time traveling?
There's a few ways. Let's start from the easiest way of looking at things. In our world, we have people that are actually prophets. We call them sports forecasters, financial analysts, architects, engineers, pilots, anybody who takes known information, projects it forward to its most likely outcome. The difference is here that these people have 8,000 years on us technologically. And that's not linear, that's a spiral, Technology, 8,000 years, good gosh.
That's a lot.
They also have time travel capability, and they have people in their world, too, who are truly highly, clairvoyant, so they can pool their resources and find out these things. And this is what, we still haven't grasped it. There are people out there, and they are way ahead of us. And they're trying to help without interfering. And that's something that, again, people also don't understand.
Well, that's kind of like when you see something going on maybe in your neighborhood and it's bad, like you see a couple guys breaking in a basement window. You usually don't run over there and try to stop them. You help by calling the police and letting somebody know that it's happening. Now it's up to them to use that information and change what's happening, right?
That's exactly right. It's perfect analogy. I often say to people, if I'm walking through the neighborhood at night and everybody's asleep and I see a fire starting in someone's basement, I'm going to go and pound on the door. They're going to be up to them, or maybe I'll call the fire department, but I want them to get out of the house if possible. So this is what we're dealing with here. We're dealing with people who have the means to assess future events with a very, very high level of accuracy. It may not be perfect, but so far, unfortunately, they haven't been wrong. Unfortunately, So it's up to us now if we are going to or not wake up, stop entertaining ourselves, stop running around with imaginary everything, playing video games and online identities that aren't real and blah, blah, blah. If we're going to really and truly take responsibility for our own lives, we are going to have to start right away. If we don't, we're caught, bang, flat-footed. And this is the year, I've been saying this to people since the beginning of the year, this is the year we're going to see the beginning of colossal changes in events and upheavals. And look at these. There was just another big earthquake in Nepal, I think a 7.3 or something. I mean, this stuff is going on. The volcanoes are erupting, but this is suppressed in the news so that we'll keep buying, useless stuff. We'll buy medications where they tell you that the thing will probably kill you if you take it, and people are stupid enough to go to their doctor and ask for it. As long as we're like that, as long as we're willing to be that dumb, gosh, it's pretty sad, projection here.
Well, yeah, we've got a society or a world of followers. Unfortunately, there's like if the TV tells somebody that this is the way you should do things, they run and do it. They've spent years destroying, the minds of people with these pharmaceuticals and even television. And, they've done a really good job with 500 channels keeping people entertained.
That's right. But the thing is that it's the people who partake of that who are really responsible. We have got to take responsibility for what we do with our time. There's nothing wrong with some entertainment, but gosh, I think we really better start paying attention to, what's important, our work, our study, our thinking. And we're just, unfortunately, just way, fallen behind. And we've literally fallen behind other people in other countries as well. The Russians and the Chinese have apparently taken Billy Meier's warnings about the Apophis asteroid quite seriously. And they've come together to create a project to deflect it, because otherwise it will slam into the earth probably in 2036.
And tell us a little bit about that one. Now, I understand there's an asteroid that's supposed to come close in the next 48 hours. So we shouldn't worry about that one, but there's another one?
There is something that in 1981, it was published, and we have this illustrated online too, as a comic book, so people can take a look and see what it's like, when an asteroid hits the Earth. Meier was told about something that the Pleiadian people called the red meteor. And he was told that this thing is coming our way. There's going to be 2 passes. This result in it slamming into the Earth unless our scientists will deflect it. In 2004, 13 years later, NASA, quote unquote, discovers this particular thing, which they call asteroid Apophis. But of course, NASA says, hey, don't worry, no problem, no threat, nothing. We keep on pushing Meier's information out there about it. Just a couple years ago, NASA, funny thing, they changed their estimate of the size of the object to within 25 meters of what Meier had already published. Now, we send information out. We put press releases out, and then just a couple years ago, the Russians and Chinese said, hey, we need to put a joint project together to deflect the asteroid, which is exactly what the Pleiadian told needs to be done. Don't blow it up, because it's going to be raining down all over you if you do. Deflect it. A good way to do it is an atomic explosion. Just knock it off course. So I have in the past couple days put out 2 new blogs about the Apophis asteroid, because there are people who are contributing in my blog with ideas about why it was called the red meteor by the Pleiadian, why it seems almost ironclad that Meier's information absolutely referred to it and is absolutely correct. I have sent press releases out. I've sent all of this stuff to people at SETI, to the NASA NEXSS Nexus Initiative. Of course, they don't write back because they know it all, right? They're smarter than we are. They're smarter than some guy in Switzerland who's actually been to the depths of the universe and seen these planets and has this information. No, they're smarter, so they're not going to lower themselves to a, but maybe they will when the obviousness of this is being discussed by people all around them, and then they're the last ones to participate. So this is the red meteor, also known as Apophis, the warnings from Meier and the Pleiadian.
And when can we look forward to this red meteor?
The first pass is going to be in 2029, and then the second flyby, or we should say the second approach, that either is deflected by scientists on Earth or slams into the area in Eastern Europe between the North Sea and the Black Sea, that's in 2036.
Okay, and but I'd be surprised if we last that long with the way things are going.
It isn't looking promising.
Yeah, I wonder if we'll be able to utilize the technology to deflect something like that by that time. If we won't be in a planet of ruins by then.
Well, it's not looking good. We are just how to put it. We're a stubborn bunch of people who prefer to destroy each other and ourselves in the process, and it's just illogical. It's just beyond stupid.
Yeah, it really is. It is. If we put all our resources, and I say this, I'm a broken record, but if we put all our resources into bettering mankind rather than destroying it, imagine where we'd be today. I mean, we would be so far advanced.
You want to know something? The Pleiadian told Meier that had the library at Alexandria not been burned, had the, pardon me, Catholic Church not done all of its destruction throughout the centuries, we, humanity of Earth, would have been, by now, a space-traveling race for 200 years. 200 years. We'd not be sitting around here. We would be space travelers.
Yeah. Oh, there's a part of me that believes that there's some of us that are space travelers, and I think the government, I think they have their own secret type space programs. I don't know how effective they are with them, but I think they have them. I think that the NASA stuff is kind of a shadow for us. I don't know. I could be wrong.
What Meier has said is, while there are parties that have alternative energy craft, these are pretty much limited in their ability. We have not set up any bases or the moon, nor have human beings been on Mars. Meier has been on Mars with the Pleiadian, but we haven't had anybody else. So most of the stuff that we hear, of course, which has zero evidence ever to substantiate it, is part of the disinformation mill.
Okay, and again, you could be 100% right. I've never been to either place. I know that from the pictures that I've seen anyways, and I've gotten some pictures from some pretty reliable people I trust. Now, where they get them from and how they come about them, that's another ball game. But I've seen pictures that show that at some point, some manner of humanity, now maybe not us, but civilizations before us of some sort must have been on Mars and the moon, because on Mars I see structures, I think. Yes,
but Meier, already we have information on our site where there's a great history of, has said that there used to be a civilization on Mars. It's completely gone for a very long time. But it used to be there. There were human beings there indeed.
Now, I wonder if those human beings escaped from Mars and wound up here, some of them.
That's correct. A lot of them did. The ones that weren't killed did, but also the ones that died there, because reincarnation is said to be a fact of life, those spirits reincarnate in the Earth cycle, because this is the closest planet where evolution is at a close enough level to them where they can come and be incarnating in the cycle here. So that is something that has been published and informed about for a long time. There's no Martians on Mars. There's no little green men. There were some abandoned bases, but I think those have all been kind of destroyed over time. But we will find out any remnants when we get there, and eventually we will.
All right, and I was going to save this for after the break, which is coming up in about 10 minutes, but I'll shoot it out there now. Some of the listeners want to know what Billy Meier might have known, if anything, about Planet X, Nibiru.
That was a comet that comes around every 3,500 years or so, and that was never inhabited. The Anunnaki story is not an accurate story. It's a kind of mishmash of things that pertain to the Sumerians, who were a highly advanced race that were helped by extraterrestrials. But all of this stuff, what to say, it's just a mishmash of...
It's been blown out of proportion through the years.
Oh, goodness. Yeah.
Yeah, I know how that goes. You could get about 20 people at a dinner table and pass a secret around, and by the time it gets back to you, it's probably changed 5 times.
Exactly. So we have to realize that there aren't too many people that know anything at all significant about much of anything, and certainly not when it's connected to the... when it's compared to Meier's information.
I
think it's just kind of like, we've got to start to study that, because it's got far more substance.
Right. All right. Well, Michael, let's take that break, and then we'll come back. I've got more questions, and of course, if anybody's got questions and they want to phone in, they're more than welcome to do that at 803-317-2264. Significance that they have fed him for us?
Well, I mean, I think it's just we've been given so much information and so many warnings that, in terms of that type of thing, we've gotten all that and more, than we can use. But we've been given something else, and that is we've been given what they call the spiritual teaching. Now, this is a non-religious, no belief system teaching, just as if we were to study any other subject. But this subject, the spiritual teaching, actually teaches us how to think, how to take control back in our individual lives, so that we know, how to reverse those things that can be still reversed, how to fix the mess and the messes that we've made and brought down upon ourselves, that which we still can, and then how in the future to, kind of pick up the pieces and to rebuild a world in the right way.
I think
that's the stuff.
I think that the only problem with that is, and I hate to be the black cloud, but I guess I call it like I see it. And if you look at the way people are right now, even just here in the United States and even around the world, but more in the United States right now, but you look at the way people are, and it's like they don't stand up to do anything until it's coming through their front door. And I'm afraid at that point it's too late. And so I'm not so sure. It's like there's people who say, well, I want to change, but I'm one person. And they don't understand that it starts with that one person. And until they all realize this and we all come together for a mutual agreement and peace here on this planet, I mean, we're gonna definitely face that fate. I mean, if it's not something from space that takes us out, it'll be the Earth itself, because we're just sucking her dry. I mean, they're taking every resource out of it and just bombing it. And I mean, how much can one planet take?
Well, this is very much what Meier started to warn about as far back as 1948, when he was 11 years old, and then again in 51 and in 58. This is it. I'm, not disputing with you that we are going to have, an awful lot of stuff coming down, largely because people have given up self-responsibility. That's the core of what they're trying to teach us here. They're saying everything is 100% the responsibility of a person in their own life and in our collective lives. There's no gods or saints, saviors, angels, ETs, aliens, whatever, coming to save us from ourselves.
That's something else. I've said this before. People are so apt to sit back and they're waiting for Jesus to come save them, or they're waiting for ET to come save them. And I'm thinking, put yourself in Jesus' sandals or ET shoes, okay, and sit back and look at this planet as a whole, and ask yourself, I mean, if you're on the street and there's a guy who's shooting up heroin, and that's all he's doing with his money, that's all he wants to do, and he's never, why would you give him $10? He's not going to buy food with it. But if there's a guy who really just had some hard luck, you're more apt to help that person. And I think until we start helping ourselves, how can we expect anybody else to care if we don't care ourselves?
Well, that's perfectly said. I'm laughing because it's the plain truth. It's exactly the plain truth. And that's why, unfortunately, so much of this UFO world stuff has done an enormous disservice. It has perpetuated and perpetuated and perpetuated utter nonsense. Utter nonsense. Things that don't mean anything. Things that are just leading us astray in our thinking. And we've just got to wake up and take back our lives and our power.
Yeah, we do, but will we? That's, for me, I guess I'm trying to enjoy life right now. I'm doing my part. I do these shows, and I know there's a group of people out there who will think, well, it's just entertainment, and it's not. What we do here, we do because we care. The same reason you do what you do, because you care. You want to get the word out. And we want to get the word out to those who will listen. And for, Billy Meier could be, why wouldn't you look into this and take it somewhat serious at least? I mean, I have, and I'll tell you what, after reading some of these prophecies tonight, or today, it got me thinking. I mean, I had some thinking time today, and it's, and I've thought about it, and I said, you know what? I mean, how could you dispute it? We are headed that way. I mean, these natural catastrophes are unnatural, however you want to whatever ballpark you're in, they're coming. It's happening, and it's here now. It's people always say, "Oh, it's coming, it's coming." No, it's here. It's here. It's happening. The changes are here. We could see it in our weather. We could see it in the reaction of the planet, and who knows what else is coming down the pike. But well, maybe Billy does. So we could talk a little more about that. I mean, what else did Billy Meier? Well, before we even get into any other type of prophecy stuff, how about attempts on his life? I mean, they obviously, this being true, the government would not like it, not one bit, or at least alphabet agencies within the government. So how many attempts might they have taken, if any? Now, I understand there were some, right?
22.
Wow. 22. That's more than Dr. Coldwell.
Listen, it's more than anybody, really. I mean, people, think I must be kidding. No, I've spoken to witnesses to 14 of them. I've seen one of the bullet holes through a window myself. I mean, it's like this guy, he's not popular with a lot of people, like people in religions and people in the intelligence services. He tells the truth. He risks his life to do it. He puts out the information, and then, of course, as is typical of humanity, people try to kill him.
Wow. And now, what have they done? Like cutting brakes, taking bullet shots at him, obviously. So those types of attempts, right?
Yeah, it's been, as you said, messing with the car, but lots of handgun, rifle, knife, hatchet, you name it. I mean...
Is he protected is E.T. keeping him around? I mean...
The Pleiadian protected him for a while during the early years, and then they told him he'd have to just kind of, work it out to protect himself and be very attentive. He has this kind of a safe area, relatively speaking, that he can go around in, but he has to be responsible basically for his own safety. And with his friends, the people there. And indeed, it's a pretty rough gig.
And I take it law enforcement is absolutely no help in all this. I suppose they say, "Oh yeah, well," and now they just snap. Don't worry about it.
Well, it's not even that. It's just that because he lives in a remote, rugged area, if somebody takes a shot at him, let's just say, and they report it, it's still going to be time before police can come from the closest place. It's not like they have a police station down the block. They really do live in a remote area.
I see. Now somebody asked, but you're saying there is evidence, and I think the prophecies, I think if people would take time to look at those, they would see that, there's some things in there that are just hard to dispute. But somebody asked, why do they want him dead? And they promised they weren't being sarcastic here, but why do they want him dead if he doesn't have any physical type evidence that can explode the whole thing?
The physical evidence is mind-boggling. You have to remember, Meier, as I said before, 1,200 clear daytime photos, 8 films, a video, sound recordings, metal samples, all of which were presented at pre-computer, pre-digital time, and they're still being scientifically authenticated today with our newest state-of-the-art photo analysis tools. Two top-level photographic experts last year did analyses on 3 categories of Meier's evidence, and they authenticated it. And they, you don't have to take their word for it. One of the things, it's brilliant, they actually, one of the experts took one of the photos that everybody said was a hoax for 30 years. He dropped it into Photoshop and just adjusted the brightness and the contrast. Now, this is a film photograph, not a digital. And suddenly what people were saying was just a model against the black curtain. It shows that it's a craft hovering over a gravel road with grassy hillside and a fence post, and you can do it yourself on your computer if you've got Photoshop. I'm lousy with that stuff. I was able to do it. And they did, 3 other analyses, very lengthy. One of them, 74 pages. They used Google Earth. They used all this imaging stuff, 3D, blah, blah. And they were able to show that these are large objects, clear as day. Meier was 15 feet away from some of these craft when he took the photos. And when you look at this, you go, wait a minute, why didn't I really ever know about this? I've been, hearing all about imaginary alien abductions, but here's a man meeting with people voluntarily, photographing their craft within 15 feet, and I didn't even know about it. So my website, theyfly.com is my website. I have a blog link to it where people are discussing this stuff, but if you go to my website, you can just be searching that website and reading stuff and looking at photos and at reports, forever. And if you don't find what you're looking for, you send me an email, and then I send you, links and information. Sometimes it takes me a few days, but I answer everybody. And on top of that, I have a new award-winning film out called And Did They Listen? And if any of your listeners want to buy that DVD, and by the way, they can get it even cheaper just downloading it. It's through my site. But if they go to my site and they want to buy that DVD and they just mention your name, I'll give them another free film, another full-length film for free at the same order. So that's my little special thing, and that's about as promotional as I get.
Oh, awesome. But thank you.
Well, sure. But realize everything on my site and blog, otherwise the information's all free. And yeah, if you want a film, if you want to really, get this whole story, great. But you can read for weeks and months just what's online. And people are, we're going after SETI, we're going after NASA. I have a NASA aerospace engineer who came forward last year and he said, hey, I'll join you on stage. The Meier case is real. Then a guy from Orbital Launch Systems down there in Tucson area, the people that send rockets up into space, he said, I will too. Of course it's real. A few years ago, a world-class astrophysicist, David Froning, he joined me on my stage at a presentation in L.A. He supported the case. People don't know about this. They're hung up with this utterly garbage-filled imaginary UFO nonsense. Aliens, none of which has got any substance. Nobody proves it. And here we are. We're just loaded for bear all the time.
Yeah, that's true. The people that have no kind of proof, they do seem to go higher on the totem pole, and I think it's planned that way, to be honest with you. I think that those who are telling the truth obviously get shoved to the bottom of the barrel if they could do it to them. And let me ask you this. A good question comes from our chat room. Is the CIA, do they still have a house nearby? And I would say they would want to be close, at least in that timer, or they'd want to be close so they could try to capture this stuff themselves, right?
Well, your friend is pretty knowledgeable there. There's an abandoned, although it might have been just retaken over by the Swiss, there was an abandoned Swiss military base. I think it was a rocket base too. It's up the hill from where Billy lives. It has an angle that it kind of overlooks his property. In the 70s and through the 80s or so, the CIA had taken it over to observe. They actually got some of their own photos of the craft. They told us to one of the investigators, and they said they're not turning them over for analysis, but they had their own photos. And about 8 years ago it was, I think, that I asked Billy about the CIA, were they still on the base? And he said, oh, no. He says, they don't need that anymore because their technology with their satellites and everything is so sophisticated, they can do their spying from far off. And, of course, listen, Meier he broke the whole story about the NSA Microsoft thing before Edward Snowden did by a couple of years. It's online. It's been there since before Snowden did it. If people ever get an idea of what's going on with this, they're going to be so mad. They're going to be not only mad at the government and all these powers that be that suppress everything, they're going to get mad that they've been played for suckers by this UFO BS world and run around in circles about nothing. Absolutely nothing. Has any of it ever panned out and given us one significant anything? So here you are, the Meier case. Over 26,000 pages of information. About 5,000 are in English. And still, with what we've got in English, it's massive. How much information?
I looked at pictures today, and I was watching videos on your website, and I was checking out the prophecies on another page, and I'll tell you what, it kind of sucked that it was getting close to showtime, and I had to stop. I mean, I wanted to keep going.
Well, you can continue to your heart's content. I mean, we have more stuff that'll be coming out. Honestly, it's just that there's so much going on. I have footage about, some interviews I've done, presentations, other things that I haven't even had time to edit. I'm putting out 2 to 4 blogs a week. I do my interviews. I go and I do live presentations. I'm going to be up in Canada at the end of June, and probably doing something again in San Francisco maybe earlier in June, and then there's Kansas City. I mean, there's a lot of stuff, and I love doing this because it's so important that people get this information. All of this, look, the Enoch prophecies, where they warn about all the stuff of the Russian, the attacks and all. Meier was saying as far back as 81, the United States of America will have 2 coming civil wars, one following upon the other, and it can't be helped but that the country is going to break up into 5 territories under various kinds of dictatorial rule. You're going to have some right-wing fanatical religious people trying to run territories in this country. This is coming. This is not a joke. Look, we don't have to go to and have every terrible thing fulfill on us if we will just start to wake up, to get a little proactive, to talk with people, to look into this material, to start bugging all the online forums and radio shows and TV shows, demanding of them that they pay attention. I'll send you copies of press releases. We just put one out a week ago. I mean, this stuff is powerful stuff.
Now, the Civil Wars, did he give a I know he doesn't really do time frames as much as he does pictorials, the cars will have no mirrors. So is there a time frame on the Civil War? Because honestly, for me, it feels like it's close.
Well, here's something kind of strange. Yeah, about 2 years ago, Meier and the Pleiadian, they had a conversation, which of course he publishes it. And he talks about, listen to this, the way they said it to him. I'm not reading it, but I remember basically what it said. They said, as we told you in 1975. Imagine that. As we told you in 1975, unless the people of America change their course of their country, by 2020, the U.S. will probably no longer be a superpower, and we're talking the potential time for anarchy and civil war. That's 4.5 years from now.
And I think you're being kind. I think that's given us more time than we may even have now. Things seem to be speeding up.
You're right, but see, the thing is, it doesn't mean that suddenly in 2020, the switch is thrown and everything's terrible. It means it progresses, if we can use that term, towards that. And that means that what we're in now, what's coming, what we see unfolding and evolving just about every day, that is the kind of stuff, the polarization in this country is what is leading us into this civil war. Cultural, political, racial, you name it. We're just at each other's throats like idiots and manipulated. People talk about, the elite, blah, blah. Who cares? The point is, unless we wake up and start behaving intelligently ourselves, and look, a lot of the people that think they've got power now, you talk about anarchy and stuff like that, sorry, we're not going to be able to hold that all together. It's just...
I agree, and I've been telling people for a while, when they get our internet, then they're coming for the guns, and after they get the guns, they're coming for us. And some have said, well, that's fear-mongering. Well, I don't see it as such. I see it as telling you what's coming, because I mean, that's it. Right now, we've got the internet, but they're already making way on that. I mean, we already know about the neutrality thing that they're doing and such, and you know, and then they want to tamper the guns. And then I got to thinking and said, well, they don't even need to take the guns; they could just put a shortage on the ammo. And I think that for most people, they don't even have to. A lot of this Walmart stuff's been going around. Oh, the Walmart's closed; they're going to put people in them, folks. They don't need to load you in a Walmart. All they need to do for most people is open the FEMA camp gate, open the door, and say, there's in there, we have an Xbox, a TV with 300 channels, and a bunch of Hot Pockets in the freezer. And I guarantee most people will walk right in.
I'm sorry to be laughing, but unfortunately your cynicism is well-founded. Because you see, the thing is this, with all this stuff about FEMA camps and all the rest of it, this is a country of over 310 million people. You know, where are you going to start moving 310 million people around? Sure, there can be various types of things, and I'm not telling you that I know, and I'm not telling you that nothing like that will happen, but civil war, that's a far more likely outcome, because when you look, even think about it this way, let's say the federal government starts to try to actually pull off some of that stuff that people are, all worried about conspiratorially, and then you've got people who are in militias. You've got all sorts of wild cards of people armed to the teeth. There's gangs. There's all sorts. They're not going. There are people, sure, who are going to be sheep-like and give in, but there's going to be people that are going to be shooting at the military, shooting at each other. This is when you get breakdown and civil war. I'm not a cheerleader for that. I don't want to see that happen, but certainly you're right that in a situation like that, when everything's going chaos-wise, if they put on announcements, just step this way, your whole 300-channel TV thing, oh my gosh, how terribly cynical, but I'm afraid you're probably right.
Yeah, I mean, people will be thankful just to have a roof over their head and a television. I mean, and it's unfortunate, but it's true that there's a lot of people who are in that boat, because it's just the way it's been planned that way for a long time, too. It's to get the people to need us, to need the government, to, like we're babies and we need to be taken care of. And a lot of people have fallen into that.
But you see, if the scenario of the collapse in effect of the federal government, when you have civil war, you don't have a strong federal government, running everything. And then when the country breaks into 5 territories, look, we already have states that are working towards secession. This is on its way. So it's not at all in the slightest something that is completely unpredictable and out of the question and ridiculous. It's really, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Did he say at all, or did they tell him at all about like how the country would be broken up and what sections and what parts would be? I don't know what part would be old America, maybe, if that would even exist, and what parts would be.
They didn't go into those types of details, because basically when they said, 2 civil wars, I think that tells us it ain't good. We're not looking at good outcomes with that kind of thing. And the major cities, in that same prediction, it gets worse in those predictions, because they basically say America's greatest cities will be destroyed. America will be a country of complete destruction. Well, now that's not happy talk.
Well, yeah, look at Detroit already. I mean, that city's falling apart, and I think that it's actually part of the plan. It's going to be a domino effect. And you look in California with the drought and things that are going on, so you're already seeing cities falling.
This is true. So what we see here is that, we want to back off of just wanting to, talk about how all these terrible prophecies and predictions and blah, blah. Let's just say this stuff is coming unless human beings, that's us, do something to improve our thinking, our behavior. And you're right as well that there isn't the hugest indication that people are, leaning in that direction. So we simply have to turn to what the essence of this case is, and it's called the spiritual teaching. And it means, okay, calm down. Here's how you, human being of Earth, you yourself can take control of your life, learn to think, learn to access your true capability to create your destiny far, far, far beyond any of this New Age hyper-happy talk. Real stuff based on reality. And it's an ancient, ancient, ancient teaching. And Meier is the, it's said in this, he's the final prophet in this series of 7 to bring the same teaching to earth, but this time it won't be screwed up. It won't be corrupted. It won't be turned into a religion that doesn't have any resemblance to the true teaching. This is a very vast, vast, long, historical, far-reaching situation, and it's for us on Earth.
Did these extraterrestrials, did they talk to Billy Meier about ET involvement, say, a couple thousand years ago?
Oh, yeah, well, of course, sure.
I thought
and
so.
Beyond that, far beyond that, yeah. Well, look, the history, and we have this in a free document online too, we can read about the true history of humanity on Earth, its origins going back 22 million years to the Sirian star system, and all of the various comings and goings of human beings from other worlds that have come here, that have left. Some got stranded, some died out, some kind of regressed evolutionarily into primitive tribes and then started to go back into positive evolution. Some represented themselves several thousand years ago as our gods of our religions. Right? So this has almost anything you can think of. That's why we have a search engine. You just start throwing search terms in there, and oh my goodness, you're going to be swamped with information to think about. And there isn't one thing on the site to believe. You have to figure it out. Is this true? How will I know? Okay, what's the research? Where's the documentation? Where's the analysis? Where's the scientific corroboration? And it's all there.
Well, I still say the cars with no mirrors, that got me. That
Yeah, that's part of it. Oh my gosh. I mean, we have over 200 specific corroborations already. Really. In 1988, Meier's on board a craft with one of the ETs to look at a planetary alignment. They're talking about stuff. And the guy says to him, if you come over here and you look at this, you can touch the screen, and you can also kind of make things move around and change. He's describing all this. And then so Meier goes over and he takes his, he takes the guy's hint and he starts to talk about, oh my goodness, this is really amazing. And well, basically what he's doing back then, I think it's 1988, he's describing 3D holographic touchscreen technology. As a matter of fact, wait a minute, I think it's here. I think I can actually read you a couple sentences just so you'll know if I did. Let's see if I captured it here. I'm only hoping. Let's see. Maybe I have it here. Bear with me.
Okay.
There's so much stuff here that you just keep on finding stuff and you keep going, oh my gosh.
I know. And I was reading a section earlier about how it was prophesized that TV and then later computers would come out.
1951. He predicted the internet too. People won't believe it, but he did. Hey, here we go. The guy's saying to him, this is Quetzal, the extraterrestrial. I'm just jumping in sentence 8. Here we are even further away from the planets than if you were to observe them from the Earth. Now, this is a long distance away. He says, you can see them better if you observe them through this magnification device. Here, Billy says, fantastic. This is probably a completely new device. And Quetzal says to him, yes, and it reflects the image recordings three-dimensionally. Billy says, I can see that. This is the most perfect 3D image that I've ever seen with you. He says, here, do you see this now? And Billy says, this is really incredible. The entire alignment has moved out of space and into the foreground. Now I can recognize every single planet. And Billy is told then, if you glide one finger away and over this scale, then you can enlarge it or shrink the image depending on how you please. On this opposite contact line, however, with a simple touch of the finger, you can separate out any square as a cutout, which you can then also enlarge again with a scale, by which means it is possible for you to separate out individual planets and observe them individually. And one can enlarge the image of the planet on the whole. Yeah, certainly, test the advice. And so he's doing this, and he says, man, this is amazing. And he's looking at all the satellites around Earth and everything. So what's happening? This is, and I give you the date. Oh my gosh, I was off by years. March 11, 1982. Touchscreen technology. He's describing 3D holographic touchscreen technology, and people are still thinking about Grays and Roswell and all this imaginary stuff.
For me, Michael, I've had 3 outstanding sightings. I've had more than that, but 3 that I could literally say I know I was looking at an intelligent craft. And the last one was a huge mothership. It was here in Columbia, South Carolina, and thankfully my wife seen it with me. So we both viewed this thing, and it looked like all energy, and it just went slowly overhead, and like it was nobody's business. And I thought, unbelievable. I mean, I live for this stuff. I know we're not alone. I'm not trying to convince anybody else that we're not alone. If they want to be hard-headed and believe that we're the only ones, then go for it. You're the ones that are going to have heart attacks when it finally comes to pass. But these things are real.
Right. The thing is this. Not every craft or object in the sky is extraterrestrial. Something maybe that big it might have been. There are some ETs out there. I've had 7 sightings. I've been within 20 feet of one of the small monitoring craft when I was living up in the mountains in Brazil in 2011. And I went over to Switzerland the next week, and Meier said, "Oh yeah, one of the monitoring craft. They just came by to look in on you." And I said, "Okay, fine." And it's kind of a neat little thing. 20 feet away. And at first I was scared. It was so close. And then I just watched the thing move away. And they see them all the time in Switzerland. But, again, with the craft and all that, that's the technology. It's very exciting. But we are so not in need of that as a focal point. It's great if you have the experience. I can sign on with you there. But, boy, do we really have to, upgrade our act and prevent the kind of horrific stuff that we are otherwise, allowing and creating for ourselves on this planet.
That's absolutely right. And, for me, I'm trying to do the best I can, and I guess I don't have as much faith in humanity as some other people do. I try to, and there's, when I do this show, and I look in our chat room and people call in, I get hope, because sometimes we'll hear from 17, 18-year-olds who are talking about changing things for the better, and it really makes me feel good that, okay, maybe I was wrong. And then I go to say, I don't know, you go take a look at Walmart on a Black Friday, and you think, oh, we're doomed. We're doomed. Take a look at Walmart on a Black Friday, and you think, oh, we're doomed. We're doomed.
Sure. It's an up and down thing. But the other thing to remember, because I go to Walmart too, and then you know what I do, honest to goodness, I look at everybody and I figure, hey, these are all, my fellow earthlings here, and I shouldn't, just rule everybody out or, think I'm superior to everybody. Sure, there's people here that I can clearly see are not interested in the kinds of things that we should be paying attention to. But I'm going to stay cheerful, because the truth for me is that no matter what I think, whenever I, interact with somebody here or there or whatever, I really never have an experience with people. It's hard to, I won't say never, but it's really hard for me to remember a time when I really disliked a human being that I met and talked to, that I didn't find something that was really cool, for me to get out of meeting with another person. I have my quick judgments. I have my, superficial assessments of people too, and sometimes they're right. Just we all do. But I now that I know that, I really try as much as I can to see this other part that shines through the thing where all of us are in it together. Because we really are, whether we like it or not, we are in it together.
Well, yeah, we're all going to stand together or we're going to hang together, and I prefer we stand together. So that's my preference is standing together. We need to take one last break here, and then you and I will come back and talk some more. We'll finish up. We've got about another half hour or more to go here, folks. If you want to call in, 803-317-2264. You can also call in using Skype. Our Skype ID is Late Night in the Midlands, and we'll take questions in the chat. And I gotta say, Michael, I'm convinced. I really am convinced that Billy Meier did have contact, and because some of these things he knew, unless somebody could absolutely prove to me that it didn't happen. I have to say that it looks more like it did, because he's just, there's things he knows that I don't see how he could have known. I just don't. But
I agree.
All right, let's take that break, and folks, we'll be back in a moment. And Michael, I'll throw you on hold here and bring you back right after this break. So, folks, again, this is Late Night in the Midlands. Oh, and by the way, next week I'm planning a pretty good Planet X show. We haven't done one of those in a while. I have a guest who's been on the show before, and he's got a pretty decent theory on it all. He's telling me that don't write it off so quick because it could be true. So we're going to talk to him, I think, next week. It hasn't been finalized yet, but I think we'll be scheduling that one for next week. We are booked up the rest of this week. We get booked up quick, so I try to keep some dates open for things like that. So anyways, folks, I'll be quiet now. Let's go to the break. We'll be right back. Again, there's just things that this guy knew that I don't see how he could have known, unless you could prove otherwise. And, for looks to me like these documents are back from 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s. I mean, and these predictions or these prophecies as they come, it's then later that these things actually happen. I mean, it's hard to dispute that stuff, but although I know some people will try. Now, I've said before, people say, well, the prophecies of the Bible are coming true. And I've said this. I said, how do you know for a moment that they're not, the powers that be aren't looking at the Bible and using that as a playbook and using these technologies to make some of their prophecies look as though they're coming true when the real truth is all being held from us. See, we've heard about this big deception, and I think that people are going to be really surprised at some point, because I think that that's part of that big deception is the belief systems that they have put on people, on the human consciousness. I mean, just so many people have beliefs and live by those beliefs. And I'm telling you, you look at the information on my guest's website, and you won't have to go by beliefs. You could just take it for what it is. I mean, the evidence is there. And, it's either, it's true or it's not. I was just telling my son tonight that, the truth is just that. It's the truth. It can be nothing else. And so, there you have it. But, Michael, we're back. And first off, one listener asked whereabouts in Canada you'll be again?
Yeah, I'm going to be up in the Toronto area. Pardon me. I'm doing a presentation in Toronto proper. It's something called the Susan Smith Library. And then I'm at something called the Alien Cosmic Expo. That's all that takes place, pardon me, between June 24th and June 28th. There's info on my website about it, and if it isn't still not easy to find, you can just email me, and I can, of course, give you the details.
Okay, great. And I have another question here from the chat. And it's a pretty good question, so I'm surprised I haven't asked this yet. Is it possible Meier was used from an early age by intelligence agencies to leak info with aliens as their cover? And I guess that's a legitimate question.
Well, it is. It's we can say it's a legitimate question, but it just shows that people work way too hard trying to figure out the least likely answer, when the obvious is in front of us. If you think that our, intelligence agencies have any kind of capability in terms of craft, such as Meier photographs with such amazing clarity, such as he's filmed and videotaped, if you think that they could predict all this stuff, well, I think our game would have played out a lot better, because then they wouldn't have also suppressed him and suppressed this. They would have done everything they could to make sure that we all knew, so we could be manipulated by them. See, it's just sometimes the obvious answer is the right answer.
Yeah, well, okay, and then that makes sense too. I don't know, you might know of him, but there's a guy who claims that he was part of a jump room years ago, some secret space program, and they were able to teleport to Mars, and even and even him, it's. He believes what he's telling me, it seems, but I'm not so sure if it's all. I asked him the same thing. I said, "How do you know they're not making you believe you're jumping to Mars?" But in Billy Meier's case, he's got pictures and he's got things of that like that, and unless you could really debunk the pictures, I'd have to say that he was really seeing these things.
Well, he's not the only one. There's over 100 eyewitnesses. I'm one of them, and there's 5 other photographers. So I mean, that's pretty much off the chart. Now, with someone like Andrew Basiago, I'll just say this plain and simple. He's either a pathological liar or he's a mind control subject. That's it. Where's your evidence? We have to be willing to step up and call things for what they are. When a guy's making all sorts of claims and he can't produce a shred of evidence, he's either an outright liar or he's been manipulated. For Mr. Basiago's credibility or whatever's sake, I would hope that I'd hope he's been manipulated rather than he's just a pathological liar. Where's the evidence? We've got to start, being realistic here.
Yeah, and I always ask for evidence, and sometimes when people don't have it, I take it with a grain of salt. But evidence is always I love that more than anything. When somebody can prove their case, I mean, that does it for me. And for UFOs, no one's ever had to prove to me that there's these crafts visiting us from somewhere else. I know there is. But when you get people like Billy Meier who are in contact with them and they're getting prophecies from them, and people say, well, that can't be, and this, that, the other thing. And I'm thinking, but these will be the same people who tell me don't forget about the Bible prophecies. The end times are here. And it's like, okay, well, how did that work?
Yeah, exactly. I'll tell you something. You talk about proof. The Bible prophecies are very interesting. I think some of them probably, have some accuracy about times and things like that. However, the problem is that they're not specific. There's a lot of generalities and horrible generalities that people accept as being specifics. You mentioned about proving something. 2 years ago, I was in Las Vegas. That's where it was. I had a table at a MUFON event. By the way, I've pressured MUFON enough that they finally have put the Billy Meier case up on their website. They won't investigate it, but they finally are mentioning it. Here's what happened. This guy walks over to the table. He's a kind of late middle-aged guy, stocky guy, kind of a serious look on his face, but he's shaking his head back and forth like, no, no, no. And I'm going, I said, hi, can I help you out? And he said, yes, I'm interested in UFOs, but I'll tell you, this Meier case, this can't be real, blah, blah, blah. I said, well, that's interesting. I said, what do you do, sir? He says, I'm a retired judge. I said, oh, a judge. I said, could I step into your courtroom for a moment, sir? And he had that kind of a little reaction, too. He wasn't quite as vocal, but he kind of grinned at me, and he said, yes, of course. So I said, Your Honor, if I may, if I say to you that NASA's claim that they were the first to publish the information that the core of Mercury is responsible for the contraction of the outer surface of the planet. And I say to you that while they claim that, it's really somebody I know in Switzerland. He discovered that long before. Would I have to prove that to you, Your Honor? And he looks at me and says, well, of course you'd have to prove it. I said, so if I, and it just happened to have it, if I grab this book over here and I open it up and you look at this copyright page here, you see that? And he says, yes. And I scroll through these pages and I come to this page here where Billy Meier, my Swiss friend, says, something's always kind of, bothered me. What is the reason that the surface of Mercury, that the planet is contracting? And this alleged extraterrestrial woman says to him, well, that's not hard to tell you. It's the metal core. Your Honor, in your courtroom, who wins, NASA or me? And he looked at me and he grinned and he squinted and he said, you do? I said, copyrights, right? And he said, yep. You see, copyrights are the internationally recognized standard of either first publication or prior publication, if you want to put it that way. A copyright does not guarantee that the information is copyrighted is true and accurate. It only guarantees that it was published by the time that copyright date is on there. Mm-hmm. In this case, we wait 32 years until NASA claims that the reason for the contraction of Mercury is the core of the planet. Then we open up the book, and there in 1976, Meier is told that, not as a theory, but as a fact. And this judge is obviously smart enough to know that if indeed I was in his courtroom, as improbable and unlikely as it may be, Meier comes up the winner. And that judge bought a couple films, and I saw him later in the afternoon sitting in a screening of one of my films. So, it's like this is the type of thing where Andrew Basiago, Roswell, Stan Romanek, all this stuff, everybody's got a little squiggle of something that they want to make a big deal out of, but none of it amounts to a hill of beans. Now, that hill that we're going to be having to take in the morning back from the other forces, in this world, because that's going to come to that. We really are going to have to wake up and take our lives back. And the longer people sit around diddling with nonsensical UFO, alien abductions, Roswell, and all the rest of this stuff, the more they're actually frittering away valuable time when they could be studying.
But let me ask you this. I mean, did Billy Meier ever talked about the abductions are people being abducted?
Yeah. Sure. The Pleiadian and Meier, I've got that on my site too. In their own words, they've said, in our past, there were, maybe within the past 200 years, 4 or 5 actual times that extraterrestrials picked up people and examined them, basically then returned them. Yeah, they tried to block their memories. There was one hostile event with somebody, one. But all the rest of this stuff, when there's an actual abduction, it's a secret military operation to get people afraid, to prepare them for a false ET attack, all the stuff. But most of it is people's imagination, sleep paralysis, mass hysteria, people hearing stories, not picking it up, then they're playing it out in their dreams. But when it's real, it's secret military.
I see. Now, Travis Walton, him and his crew, they passed several lie detector tests. Now, that's the kind of thing that interests me when I see stuff, because I can see one guy being a good liar, but 4 or 5 of them passing these tests is...
You're right.
Yeah.
You're right. I sat with Travis Walton probably 4 or 5 years ago in New Mexico when I was doing a presentation. We were at the same expo, and I listened to him talk, and I sat and talked to him. I liked him. I thought he was a sincere guy. I thought he was genuine, and I thought he really believes his story. Now, I'm not telling you his story isn't true. I don't know that it was extraterrestrial. He doesn't either. I know that something happened to him based on, let's put it this way, I know that he and his friends say that something happened, and I would say the likelihood that something happened to them is extremely high. That it was from outer space is not so extremely high. It could be. It could be one of those really rare, on fingers on one hand things, but he believes it, and he had an experience of some sort. He can't tell you more about it because he doesn't know, and neither do the other guys. So, I sat next to him. I've talked to this guy, Jonathan Reed, who I think is full of it. I think he's just hoaxed his whole thing, but I didn't feel that way about Travis Walton. He seemed just like a really nice guy. We were sitting there having breakfast together in a diner.
Yeah, I believe him, and what he says now is that he thinks that he wasn't supposed to be there when it went to take off, and he got zapped. So the only reason they brought him aboard maybe was because they didn't want to leave evidence of themselves. So they took him on to fix him up or whatever.
Well, who knows?
Yeah.
I think it's sufficient to say something happened. And beyond that, there's not, again, it's one of these things where something happened, there's nothing you can do with it. Really, whether that case ever happened or not, it doesn't make a bit of difference except for people to go, ooh, wonder what happened, including Travis Walton and his friends. That's the difference between something that happened and a deliberate, planned, decades-long, ongoing, intelligent interaction, voluntarily, face-to-face, human-to-human, thousands of pages of information and conversations and evidence and photos and prophecies and predictions in the spiritual teaching. My goodness, it's just like, it truly is night and day. And that's, it's an uphill battle because we've been so conditioned to phenomena and, oh my goodness, something from outer space or whatever. It's just not getting us anywhere. It's not getting us home, so to speak. It's not giving us the reason for anything. So we've got to really, kind of wake up. Those of us, people that listen to your show, people that'll come to my site or watch a film or whatever, and that is that 2-for-1 invitation stands for. They're not going to just settle for being titillated. Hopefully not. They want to know more. But where are you going to go to know more? I guarantee you cannot find verifiable information on the really important stuff anywhere else. Now, if you want to show me that I'm wrong, I don't mind that, because I'm a learning human being. I make mistakes. I get upgraded and informed, but nobody's ever been able to show me that A, the case isn't real, and B, that it isn't really the only singularly authentic, significant, ongoing context. Look, if it's true that there really are extraterrestrials and they're in contact with somebody on Earth, that's the single most important story in all of science and human history. It's not just the stuff for chit-chat. It's the most important story in history. We've got to be able to really prove that one, not accept everybody. These people, Basiaggio. When was the last time the president called up Basiaggio or Stan Romanek or this one or that? When was the last time a senator, congressman, Supreme Court justice, the governor of a state, the mayor of someone's city, the dog catcher approached these people? No, but we're supposed to believe that highly developed, advanced, space-traveling human beings, hundreds and maybe thousands of years in advance of us, with long lifespans and super technology, have decided to come here and float you through the wall. No way. You're going to have to prove that one to me.
Yeah. And I hear you. And for me, I listen to everybody because you never know, but I only will back up the stuff that I can prove. And that's what my biggest interest is. That's why I do this, is to get those answers, because I'm trying to put a puzzle together and everybody's got a piece. But the problem is there's a lot of bad people out there who try to make pieces fit that don't. And so you've got to be able to weed through that stuff. And I think this whole Billy Meier contact is just, it's way interesting. I mean, it is. And I'm when I get done here tonight, I'll be going right back to read more, because I want to read as much as I can, because when I see, and these things were documented years ago. So, so it's not like something happened and it was wrote up and then said, oh, this is when it was from, because that's not the case. This is real stuff. He was pretty accurate on a lot of things. Now, There's a couple things I guess people will debate about. Like, I think, was there something in the 80s that France or something was supposed to be taken over, or Italy was going to be taken over? And
yeah. As I've said, the 58 was the first time that Meier predicted the worldwide irrepressible Islamic terrorism. In 81 and 87, he also specifies that France will fall first to Islam, then probably to Russia or China. I wasn't sure which one he meant. And that, of course, Italy is going to have huge problems with Islam. The Vatican will be attacked ultimately, and a lot of other stuff. The Catholic Church there is going to pay big time. I mean, it's going to be pretty brutal. And we're not out of the woods by a long shot. When Meier predicted the information on the World Trade Center in 87 as well, he said this is only the beginning of things that will happen to America that will be barely imaginable to the people of the world coming here because of our international policies. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So why did they contact Billy, and how many others were contacted? Were there others who were contacted as well?
There were 5 other people who were potential for this. They kind of hedged their bets. The other ones turned out to not be necessary, but some who would have been approached would have declined. They were not up for it. A couple died before that happened. But here's the information according to the information in the case. I cannot prove what I'm about to tell you. I can only tell you that this is what they state very matter-of-factly. Okay. Meier's spirit is an extremely ancient spirit. I mean, far more ancient than we can imagine. It has played the prophet. On our planet, this is a relatively recent gig for it. Goes back about 13,500 years here, and even before with other comings and goings as the previous personalities. But Meier's role as the prophet on this planet, he's known as Billy Meier now, but previously his spirit was incarnated as Enoch, Elijah, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Emmanuel, we'll get back to him, and Muhammad. Emmanuel was the real name of the man whose name was changed falsely to Jesus Christ, a man who never existed at all. There is not one verifiable historical document from that time that ever mentions a man named Jesus Christ. It didn't happen, he didn't live, but a man named Emmanuel did. He was foretold in Isaiah 7:14. He was mentioned again in Matthew 1:23 in the New Testament, and his name shall be called Emmanuel. Emmanuel was crucified. He survived the crucifixion. He, members of his family, and some of the disciples. By the way, there were 17 female disciples. You'll never hear about otherwise. But these people with Emmanuel went ultimately into India, where he died at 110 years of age. There's a tomb there for him. There's a tomb for his mother, Mary. And Meier's, one of his children, Meier married an Indian woman when he was about 45 or 48. Emmanuel, pardon me. And had numerous children. One was named Joseph, 70 years after the crucifixion, brought the true teaching of Emmanuel and hid it in the very tomb of the crucifixion, which was, of course, all empty and abandoned. And Meier and a Greek Orthodox priest were led there by the Pleiadian in 1964. They dug their way in. They took up the stones from the floor. They found the scrolls that were wrapped in resin-encrusted animal skins that were the original writings of Emmanuel. They have part of them were translated some years ago, called the Talmud Emmanuel. But this is just to give you a little bit of a history and genealogy. Sure. Muhammad, all of these prophets brought the same teaching, but it was always screwed up and changed by their quote-unquote disciples and the churches and cults and religions that started because they want to control people. Muhammad was not a child abuser or a woman abuser. He was a champion of women. He never married a child. These things were all corrupted as well. But Emmanuel, 500 years before Muhammad, said to the scribes and the Pharisees, because you have persecuted the true prophets of the past, as you persecute me, In 500 years, there comes another true prophet, and you won't recognize him as one. But he will be a true prophet. And he will teach the teaching of truth as well, which will also be corrupted. And their false and evil cult will be formed around him. But unless your distant descendants, you Pharisees, scribes, Israelites, Hebrews, unless your distant descendants make a true and just peace with the distant descendants of the rightful owners of these lands that you have stolen, you will come to a bitter end, and you will both go down, into death, etc., etc. So Billy Meier, again, according to the information in the case, is the seventh and final prophet whose spirit is the reincarnated spirit of Enoch, Elijah, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Emmanuel, and Muhammad. We can't do too much with that. We needn't believe it, certainly. But that's simply what they've said, why it's happening.
And and I tell people all the time that, when it comes to the whole biblical thing and the religion that's been spun on it, it's, for me, okay, there's probably some truth in there. However, we have to understand, if we can all agree that man is deceiving and that it comes down to control and greed, then we have to look back and we got to say, okay, so man was in charge of putting this thing together. Obviously, they're going to leave out what they don't want us to know, and they're going to put in what they want to control us with. And people don't like to hear that, and it gets them all angry and gets their panties in a bunch. But, it's the way it is. I'm sorry. It's, for me, it's, I'll take the Bible, I'll take these things, these religious scriptures or what have you, which I don't think were meant to be religious at all. I think they were more of a historical thing. But I take these things, but I look, I go outside that box. I mean, if we're just going to take something, like I could tell you tonight, well, this is the meaning of life. And you could say, all right, well, that's all I need, thanks. And go out about playing your video games for the rest of your life, because now you've got all the answers, right? Or you can say, okay, well, maybe he's right, but let me look and let me, I think each one of us are meant to find our own truth. I think that we're here to discover ourselves, to discover what it all means. And nobody else is going to give us those answers. We've got to open up, and we've got to be searching. And if you're just going to take, if I could just hand you a pamphlet and tell you, hey, this is all you need to know, and you're going to accept that? Well, I've got a yard that needs raking, and I've got some trees that need trimming, and it's all in the book.
Well, the thing is this. I think I would put it this way. Each of us needs to find truth our own way. Real truth isn't subjective. It isn't subject. We might say, in my life, what I found out what was true, and we can say, okay, this is true and that isn't. We can say that's my truth. But the problem is that real about life and all these things, there is a truth. And we all must find out what that truth is. Nobody has an exclusive on it, but if it's true truth, it's the truth. And what's said here in the Meier case is that that's why there's a spiritual teaching, so people can study and try to determine the truth and try to work their way through this so they can understand and not have to rely on beliefs. We're leaving this age of belief for the age of truth and knowledge. Yeah. It's going to be a rough, road.
Yeah, it is.
But, yeah, it is. There's no doubt. But this is why we have got to, we're going to go through a lot of stuff. There's just no two ways about it. And, of course, it always sounds like, well, you're trying to say he's the only. Look, yes, I'm telling you that Billy Meier is the only, true UFO contactee. If you've got somebody else in mind, any of you, go ahead, bring it forward. That would be just dandy. But if you don't, then maybe you want to start studying this and finding out what is true. Then it isn't about what I claim. It isn't about what Billy Meier says. It's really about finding the truth. And once we do that, We are far more empowered as human beings. We're not subject to beliefs, religions, cults, sects, goofy UFO nonsense, and all the rest of it. We are then fully empowered from the inside out, and that's the only way it should be.
Absolutely. And I've got one more question here from the chat, and it's, did Billy Meier see the crucifixion of Jesus Christ, and if so, what did he see?
I do not know that he did. I don't think so, but I'll tell you what he does. There is a contact report. I mean, it's pretty far out. He ostensibly, according to information of the case, he's taken back to Jerusalem in 32 AD, just prior to that crucifixion time, within days or whatever. He gets to meet and speak with Emmanuel. The whole conversation has been transcribed. It's pretty wild. There was a Russian guy, a world traveler, kind of guy that was a real solo kind of a guy who stumbled into the camp where Meier and this woman Asket were before they took this time travel trip. And that man ended up going on 2 time travel trips with Billy and Asket, and they're both transcribed. One is to 14th century France. And connected with that, there's a book that somebody found in a bookshop once that tells the story about this eccentric guy in 14th century France, and he tells a story about this guy that had this weird stuff and all, and it's exactly what Meier and this other guy apparently gave. It's mind-boggling. So I'm not going to tell you I can prove that in a million years, but I'll tell you, somebody says, well, if you have to come down on one side or the other with Meier on anything and everything, true or false? And I say true. I tried to trick him 4 times in 3 years to see if I could catch him lying. And you know what? Same answer without a hesitation 4 times in 3 years. The guy's just as honest as they come, and more so, the most documented life of any living person I know of. Photographs from the age of 4, over 40 years of transcribed conversations like a diary. I mean, it's all there, folks. Honestly, it's free. Yeah. And if you go to my blog, you can interact with people from all over the world. You can argue, you can question, you can give your theories. If you want a film, you go on my website and you find the DVD, and did they listen, or as the time fulfills, you just put Mike's name in the order. This is a place you can put a note, or you send me an email. I'll give you a second film free. I want you to have it, okay? So it's a twofer. Other than that, guys, I hope we've had fun.
We have, and all I can say is let Billy know that L&M thanks him for his experiences and sharing these with us, even through you, and thank you for all the work that you do. And I look forward to speaking to you again in the future. There's so much more I'd love to talk about, but we're just running out of time. But
sure, we'll do it. And will you send me a link to an archive when you have it?
I absolutely will. I should have a link for the archive about a couple hours after the show ends, and it ends in about another 20 minutes for me.
Okay.
So, right.
I much appreciate it. I'm going to go and catch a break here with some food or something, and we'll talk again, my friend.
All right. Well, thank you so much, and we'll keep you linked up over on Late Night in the Midlands. Thank you.
Beautiful.
All right. Have a great night.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. All right, folks. There he is, Michael Horn.
No one has been able, none of the people who claim to be contactees can put one single piece of verifiable proof, unique, significant information, something of extraterrestrial manufacture on the table. It's all anecdotal. Hardly any of them even have a fuzzy photo to show you, and it's all sorts of claims. Meier, is just drowning us with evidence and information. And unfortunately, it's a very poor indication of the level of thinking of humanity that we haven't long ago grasped that this is real.
I would agree with that. See, I'll listen to anybody, especially if they got evidence they want to produce. I'm all ears. I'm never going to wave my hand at anybody and say, baloney, until I know for sure it is. And so tell me a little bit more about Billy Meier. First, and then about his contacts and his privacy, or his prophecies. I just find it all so fascinating, and I was reading through these prophecies today, and just there's not enough time in the day. There's so much.
You're right. It's like it's voluminous. It truly is. Meier is the source of the most abundant, specific, and impeccably accurate prophetic information in human history. And again, most people don't know that either. He makes Nostradamus look like somebody who's just mumbling and making wild statements. Meier names very, very, very specific events, places, situations. Sometimes they will give dates, but often they won't, because they don't want us to sit around waiting, either hypnotized looking for something to hit us, or inactive because we feel it's fatalistically been deemed that we must experience this on a particular date. So much of this information really still gives us the free will. If we haven't passed that point of no return, it gives us the free will to start taking this advice, making adjustments, and getting ourselves out of what is otherwise truly, truly, truly a dead-end situation for humanity. It's going to set us back here on Earth eons. We will have hundreds of years of very, very, very painful struggle. And I don't think people can grasp it, honestly. It's like they don't want to pay attention. And despite the fact he would learn many, many things about the distant past, he would be shown things about future events. He would have his own thinking abilities enhanced with technology to bring forward into his conscious awareness and control abilities that were latent in him because of his own spirit's, very ancient origins. And so this would be the beginning. It would span, as I said, 11 years before he would have his, teaching and mentoring taken over by a woman named Asket from an adjoining universe, not just the solar system or galaxy, but literally from an adjoining universe. Her people, the Timar people in the Dal universe, are said to be kind of close working associates, if you will, of the Pleiadian extraterrestrials that Billy's been meeting with now for more than 73 years.
It's incredible, and it's almost, I guess for an average person it would be really hard to believe, but for me I know we're not alone. Nobody has to tell me we're not alone. But now this goes a step further. I've seen UFO craft, but I've never been on one, and I've never talked to an ET, and Billy Meier did, and so I want to know everything I can about it. Now, I do want to bring this up. There was one prophecy that I heard mentioned that it turned a light bulb on in my head, and I said, holy cow, how did he know this? But it had to do with a major earthquake, and he said at the time, the cars, they looked different, they looked funny, and they didn't have rear view mirrors. And that's how you would know the time of this event. That fascinates me because, as you know, they're coming out now with cars without the rear view mirrors. They've got these cameras.
I know. Well, let me tell you what that's about. It's a very controversial thing, but all that one needs to do is start thinking through it. And oh boy. So here's what it is. In 1978, Meier was meeting with the investigative team that came from America. And that investigative team was the retired Lieutenant Colonel Wendell Stevens from the U.S. Air Force, Britt and Lee Elders. They were very active as high-level private investigators for Fortune 500 companies working with electronic countermeasures down that is called disclosure. The Meier case is what the UFO cover-up really is about.
Right, and I've talked to some people who've been on the show, and they wanted to put those petitions forth and been doing it for years, and I always say the same thing each time. I don't think you're going to get anywhere with it, but good luck. Because, they're not going to come out and admit that they've been lying all this time, and if they did come out and admit to it, then they would have to tell us a lot more, things that they don't want us to know. And so, I don't see it happening. But I want to get into some of these prophecies in a moment, and one that just fascinates me. But I thought maybe a little bit about Billy Meier and how these contacts came about. A little bit more about him and how he got in contact like that.
Yes, well, actually, everything started when he was extremely young. He was a 5-year-old boy in Switzerland, and his father and he saw a silver disc fly overhead. They didn't know what it was. His father thought maybe it's some kind of a secret weapon of Hitler's towards the end of the Second World War, but they didn't know. And it was a short time later that young Edward, he hadn't yet gotten the nickname of Billy, but young Edward kind of heard a voice, a man's voice speaking to him in his head. It was quite a surprise for this young guy who was speaking to him in his native tongue, German, and perhaps at that point in the Swiss-German dialect. And he had subsequently gone out again, as he often did, to play in the fields and in the woods, and he went deeper into the woods on this occasion. And there, standing in a clearing next to a pear-shaped craft on 3 strut-like legs, is an elderly man, elderly-looking, standing in what looks to young Meier very similar to a deep-sea diver outfit without the helmet. And he said, this man was very kindly. I had no fear of him. He just had a very safe and good feeling about him. I came closer. We spoke to each other. He invited me on board his craft, and that began for Meier 11 years of teaching, tutoring, working with him, taking him places on and off this world, introducing to him the people on Earth who would either at that point already were or would become players on the world stage. He would Good afternoon.
Well, good, and a good evening to you, Michael. How are you?
Oh, boy. Just zooming around.
Well, listen, it is great to have you on the show tonight. I'm looking so forward to talking to you. I have been digging deep into these the Billy Meier information, these prophecies, and I find it fascinating, absolutely fascinating. So So a shout out to the listener who recommended that I have you on the show. Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, who's that?
I don't have it right here in front of me. I don't know if they wanted me to mention them on air, but yeah, somebody had said that they heard you on Dark Matter and that I should give you a buzz and see if you'd come on. So I got you, and we're here, and I thought maybe we'd start out with maybe a little bit about your background and leading up to your interest in the Billy Meier contacts.
Oh, sure. Pardon me a little.
And we are live.
Oh, okay. Well, my background was in fine arts, music, inventing, very creative stuff. And I walked into a bookstore in 1979 in L.A. I saw the first photo book of Meier's, UFO photos. And that was what really, kind of just riveted me in that moment. Now, when I saw those photos, to me, it's just kind of like I knew they were real. However, I always say to people that it's been more than looking at UFO photos for 36 years that have convinced me that what we're dealing with is, singularly unique, authentic case of a man on Earth actually being in contact with other human beings from elsewhere in the universe.
It's fascinating, and I can understand where a lot of people would have doubt of these things, because in my position, I have a lot of people who contact me on a regular basis and tell me that they're in contact with ET, and most of them I don't believe. But then when you get things like with Billy Meier, there's some prophecy there that is really hard to deny. I mean, how would he know this stuff?
Well, yes. I mean, the problem I have is someone who has been interested in this kind of phenomenon since I was, a very, very young child, that Meier's information just keeps on being authenticated. So we've got to take a look at it. We've got to be critical thinkers, not accept claims by anybody, but look at the evidence for ourselves. And, we have been putting it out there for years and years and years, sending this information to scientists, to so-called leaders, to people that claim to be interested in the UFO community and all this stuff. And we have some stunning, highly credible people that are, endorsing the authenticity, that have contributed to authenticating the information and evidence in the case. These are people who are really world-class scientists and all of that. The problem is, unfortunately, that it is still suppressed. It is kept below the radar, that people in the masses don't yet know about this.
And Michael, I was saying in the beginning of the show how people have, pretty much carved their lives in some manner over prophecies of over 2,000 years ago. I said, but then when somebody comes in our time era with something like this, it's like nobody wants to believe it. And I say you're making a big mistake if you don't at least take a look at it and with a serious eye.
I agree with you. I mean, it's like, oh gosh, how can I put this? The Meier case is the reason for the UFO cover-up. It is the reason for the UFO cover-up. Now, it wasn't always true. That's, the UFO cover-up actually started way back around World War I, and then it really got in full swing shortly after Roswell and all that, and around the time of the Roosevelt administration. But since that time, since there's nothing left of Roswell, since there's no evidence that can be forced to be presented or revealed by the government, every single one of these stupid petition Washington disclosure things are a farce. They're a circus. We chase our tails, and each and every one of them absolutely, deliberately prevents the Meier case from ever being prevented, because it would shut that farce